Live.
Oh, we're live?
We're live.
Oh, okay.
Back on a Tuesday night. Either gonna finish up Daniel 7 or we're gonna start Daniel 8. I don't know which.
I don't either.
We can go back and recap chapter 7. You said you had something you wanted to say?
Well,
No?
not yet.
Okay.
We got, David wants to give us a history lesson.
Okay.
David, why don't you give the commercial?
I'm not the one that drinks lavender tea.
Oh, well, we're doing accepting donations for lavender tea or lavender latte, and this is the best way you can do it. And we are in Daniel. Let's get to where I forgot to skip all these.
Man, pushing them buttons.
Yep, pushing those buttons. All right, so we got David Tillison with the history lesson. That's what it is, right?
Yeah, we're going to take a little historical look at the little horn had
Okay,
mean teeth and all that stuff.
okay.
And what verse was that?
We're starting off at 7.
At 7. So, David, just whenever you're ready.
Okay. We'll start off reading 7 from this one here. It says, I was considering the horns, and there was another horn, a little one coming up amongst them, before whom 3 of the first horns were plucked up by the roots. And there was in this horn there were eyes as the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking pompous words. So in this text in Daniel chapter 7, we find 10 characteristics that's given of the little horn's power. Now that this little horn power is very significant as it relates to Bible prophecy. It represents the papal power or papal role, and you've got pagan Rome and you've got papal Rome, and the little horn represents papal Rome, which played a very important role after Christ during the Christian era, but it also plays a very important role in the end times events. We want to look at these 10 identifying characteristics that we find in Daniel 7 as to the little horn power. We need to make sure we understand who this power is and be able to back it up from Scripture. The first characteristic in this power arose out of the fourth beast. And now we know that the fourth beast represents pagan Rome. So this little horn power has to come out of pagan Rome, and we look in history and it says the papacy is essentially a Roman power, both in origin as well as in character. It was cradled in Italy. Its headquarters have always been in Rome. It inherited many of the qualities and material assets of imperial Rome or pagan Rome. It bears the name the Roman Catholic Church to this day. So we can see a close connection between pagan Rome and papal Rome, both in territory. The headquarters of pagan Rome was Rome for many years. The headquarters of papal Rome is Rome, and even the name Rome is there still in the church today. So the papacy did arise from the fourth beast. It says it arose or grew up amongst the 10 horns. So now we're going to take a look at some quotes from trusted historians. The first is from a historian by the name of Myers, and it's from the General History for Colleges, page 348. He said, long before the fall of Rome, there had begun to grow up within the Roman Empire an ecclesiastical state which was shaping itself upon the imperial model. So he's talking about the rise of the papacy, and he uses the word grow up. And you remember, it talks about the little horn that grew and uprooted 3. And then we have another historian, James Harvey Robson, who writes, besides the emperors at Constantinople, and you remember, they moved the court of the headquarters of pagan Rome from Rome to Constantinople, and left the bishop of Rome eventually in charge of Western Rome, or the Western Roman Empire. It goes on to quote, and says, besides the emperors of Constantinople, the various German kings, there grew up in Europe a line of rulers far more powerful than any of these, namely the popes. Now we have 10 horns represent 10 diverse of Western Rome, or the Western Roman Empire. These Germanic invading tribes, we find that the papacy grew up to dominate after the territory was divided up. And we'll notice that when we talk about the number 3 after the 10 horns arose, you go ahead and go to, well, go ahead, someone go ahead and read 8.
Go ahead, Don.
I considered horns, and behold, there came up among them another little horn, before whom there were 3 of the first horns plucked up by the roots. And behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of man, and a mouth speaking great things.
Go ahead and read 9. Go ahead and read 9.
Oh, well, I got, you want to go ahead and do this?
Let's read 9.
Yeah, go ahead and read 9. We'll go back to that.
Okay, go ahead, wait.
I beheld till the thrones were cast down, and the ancient, capital A, of days did sit, whose garment was white as snow, and the hair of his head like the pure wool. His throne was like the fiery flame, and his wheels as burning fire.
Okay, we got into the Ancient of Days in verse 9.
Mm-hmm.
Right, you can go back to that first map.
The first one?
Yeah. Right there. You can leave that up for a little while. It says, so after a series of humiliations by barbarian invaders, the Emperor Romulus Augustus abdicated in AD 476. The political supremacy of the papacy, however, did not begin until 62 years later in 533. Justinian, emperor of the Eastern Roman Empire, decreed that the Bishop of Rome should be recognized as the head of all holy churches. This decree was put into effect in 538. And that's going to be, we're going to get to that important date a little bit later. Thus, the papacy grew into full power after barbarian kingdoms, which had divided up Rome's territory. So you have 10 horns, and then the little horn that comes up and uproots 3. So this power was to arise after the Western Roman Empire had been divided up among these various invading groups. Identifying point number 4, it says it would be different from all the others. It says the 10 horns are 10 kings who shall arise from the kingdom, and another shall arise from them. And that's from verse 24. It says he shall be different from the first and shall subdue 3 kings. So the papacy was different. Here is a quote again from the General History of College. Another consequence of the fall of the Roman power in the West was the development of the papacy. In the absence of the emperor in the West, the popes rapidly gained influence and power and soon built up an ecclesiastical empire that in some respect took the place of the old empire. So now the papal Rome is replacing pagan Rome. Point number 5, it says it was greater than his fellows. In verse 20, it says, and the 10 horns on its head, which is talking about the 10 kings, and another horn came, which came up, for which 3 fell. Namely, that horn that had eyes and a mouth speaking pompous words, whose appearance was greater than his fellows. So the little horn power seems to be greater than the original 10 horns, 3 of which are uprooted. Here's another quote from the Medieval and Modern Times, page 40 through and 41. It says, this is the historian Robson. He says, he bears witness to the fact that the papacy did indeed become the mightiest power in medieval Europe. Besides the emperors of Constantinople, my mouth's getting dry, and the various German kings, there grew up in Europe a line of rulers more powerful than any of these, namely the popes. The longest and the mightiest line of rulers that the world had ever seen. Okay, I gotta take a swig here. Now, pagan Rome ruled longer than Greece, Medo-Persia, and Babylon. If you go backwards, up Daniel chapter 2, and what interesting is papal Rome ruled even longer, 1,260 years. Ruled even longer than pagan Rome. So each of these various powers have more territory and they have a longer rule, and we can see this bearing out in history as well. Another characteristic of this little horn power, very interesting, is it uprooted 3 horns or 3 kingdoms. Verse 24 says the 10 horns are 10 kings who shall arise from the kingdom, and another shall arise after them. He shall be different from the first, and shall subdue or uproot 3 kings. Now here we take a look at what history tells us. Most of the barbarian nations to whom the Roman Empire now yielded bowed to the authority of the Bishop of Rome. But there were 3 tribes that did not accept the papacy of the pulpit. It says the Harvey, the Vandals, and the Ostrogoths, they challenged the sovereignty of the Bishop of Rome. Reason being is they were Aryan tribes, so they disagreed on some theological issues. They were more inclined to follow a bishop from Alexandria, or far as their doctrinal teachings or their religious leaning. And then we find that the first of these horns was uprooted in 497 when Theodoric, leader of the Ostrogoths, crushed the power of the Harvey in Italy. The Vandals were destroyed in 534 and the Ostrogoths in 538, thus making the way for the papacy to rise up. These kingdoms were completely uprooted and disappeared from European history. So now, referring to the map, you have your 10 kingdoms, where you see
which is right here.
Yeah. Now the 3 that were uprooted, the Vandals, is right there in North America. Now the Harvey and the Ostrogoths are the Italy's peninsula there. And it says, so other various tribes, they carved out territory of the Western Rome. We have modern counterparts. The Anglo-Saxons settled in England, and the Franks settled in France, and so on and so forth. And those 7 countries are still there today. But when it comes to the Ostrogoths, the Vandals, and the Heruli, we have no modern counterparts. They were completely uprooted and destroyed. In order for the papacy to gain influence over Western Rome, these 3 tribes had to be removed. And that's exactly what happened. Notice the date when the last of these tribes were uprooted in 538. That's the beginning of the reign of the papal power. The 1,260 years of papal supremacy. Number 7, it says the power would speak pompous words against the Most High. And we looked at the verse 25. It says, he shall speak pompous words against the Most High. He shall persecute the saints of the Most High, and shall think to change the times and laws. So here are just a few of these pompous words that originated from the papacy. There were many different quotes we can give, but just a few here will make the point. This is from Pope Leo XIII in his encyclical letter dated June the 20th, 1894. This is what he wrote. The Pope is as it were God on earth, sole sovereign of the faithful of Christ, chief of kings, having plenitude of power, to whom has been entrusted by the omnipotent God direction not only of the earthly but also of the heavenly kingdom. Does that sound like a pompous statement? He goes on to say the Pope is of so great authority and power that he can modify, explain, or interpret even divine laws. So the papacy has the power to change the word of God. At least that's what the purpose, or that's what they propose, because they say their authority comes directly from God. And they have influence not only on earthly things, but even heavenly things. Well, another characteristic of the little horned power, it says it's a persecuting power. He shall persecute the saints of God, the saints of the Most High. Well, for centuries, the soil of Europe was crimsoned with a martyr's blood. Great armies were raised and crusades were launched for the sole purpose of exterminating the so-called heretics. The historian Lecky writes that the Church of Rome has shed more innocent blood than any other institution that has ever existed amongst mankind will be questioned by the Protestant who has a competent knowledge of history. That's from the rise and influence of the spirit of rationalism in Europe, on page 32. It is estimated that over 50 million so-called heretics were put to death during the 1,260-year reign of the papal power. And that is an extraordinary number. And of course, recently, even the Vatican was forced to acknowledge that it was a persecuting power in its past, and it's made some statements in apology for the many that were put to death. Another interesting characteristic that you may have is that the thought to change times and laws. Becoming more and more arrogant, the papal church did not hesitate to tamper with the law of God. Finding the second commandment out of harmony with its use of images in worship. What is the second commandment? You're not to make any or bow down to any graven images. Now you can just imagine how that could be a problem for the Roman Catholic Church that has lots of statues and images in its church. So having a problem with that one, the papal church attempted to eliminate this sacred precept, and I'll mention something about that later. Of course, the fourth commandment that says, remember the Sabbath to keep it holy. 6 days you are to labor in all your work, but the seventh is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. They modified and shortened it to say, remember the Sabbath. And then they got to define which day is the Sabbath. At least they thought they were able to do that. The fourth commandment was shortened, and the 10th commandment was divided into 2 commandments, which says, thou shalt not covet. They had to divide the 10th in 2 to make a total of 10 commandments, because they removed the 2nd commandment. Now, if you'd like to read the actual commandments that are put together by the Catholic Church, you can simply read the Catholic Catechism. It actually shows you how they removed the 2nd commandment and divided the last of the 10 commandments and shortened the 4th commandment that talks about the Sabbath. It's clearly there. You can just read it for yourselves. So yes, this power did think to change times and laws. I'd also like to reiterate that we are using the calendar that Pope Gregory has submitted for quite a few hundred years now. And then we have our final characteristic as to this little horn power. It is to say for a time, times, and a half time. Now time is equal to a year in the Bible. Times would be 2 years, and a half time would be half a year. So that's 360 days in Hebrew months. And when we talk about prophetic times, 360 days in a year, thus we can calculate 360 plus 720, and that's 2 times plus a half time. That would be 180. That gives you a total of 1,260 days. Now in the Bible reckoning, when you're talking about prophetic time, 1 prophetic day equals 1 literal year. So we have a time period of 1,260 years. And there are some cross-references numbers there in the book of Numbers, as well as in Ezekiel. So when did this time period begin? Well, you go to the next map. Here you have the Byzantine Empire, which is actually Eastern Roman Empire. And this is the time of Justinian. Now you notice where the Vandals were at, and where the Ostrogoths and the Heruli were in Italy. He's done conquered them, so there's your 3 kingdoms that's not there anymore. What Justinian's trying to do is recapture the Roman Empire from its glory days. And this is as far as he got. So in 533, Justinian proclaimed the Bishop of Rome as the head of the holy churches and the true ineffective corrector of heretics. This decree went into effect in 538 AD when Belisarius, Justinian's general, gave the death blow to the Ostrogoths, the last of the 3 great Arian powers. In the same year, 538, Justinian published edicts compelling all non-Catholics to join the church in 90 days or leave the empire, and he confiscated their goods. So 538 is the starting time period of the reign of the little horn power, and he would reign for 1,260 days. It says on the 10th of February 1798, on pretense of insult to the French ambassador in Italy, General Berthier, Napoleon's famous chief of staff, entered Rome and took the Pope a prisoner. The Papal States were abolished and Rome was declared a republic. The Pope himself was carried off to France, where he died in captivity in August the 29th, 1799. The papacy came to power in 538, adding 1,260 years to 538. We arrived at the date of 1798. There is no other power in history that fits these 10 identifying marks other than the papal power. There's no other power that has ruled for more than 1,260 years. So that's the little horn power. And the Bible tells us this power received a deathly wound, but the deadly wound would be healed. So there's your historian view of the little horn.
So you're saying it's not future, it's history?
Yes. Actually, what it's saying is Rome, the Vatican, is the Antichrist. That's what it's saying.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
What's the Antichrist, guys?
We haven't gotten there yet.
I think it's only mentioned twice in the Bible.
Sounds like a good story.
I read that, but I believe it's mentioned more than twice. I don't know,
I know Paul mentioned it.
hadn't counted them.
Paul made the statement that even in his time it was already there.
It is, but it wasn't a capital letter. There are antichrists.
There you go.
Anybody that's against Christ is an antichrist. But there's coming
Well,
one antichrist with a capital A.
this prophetic, what they call prophetic years, I'm not so sure that every prophetic statement for that is true, because when we get into chapter 8 and you hit them 2,300 days, I'm kind of scratching my head on that one.
Yeah, there's a whole lot in it. That's why people have a lot of different views of it.
And here's where we left off last week.
Well, I understand. I understand going back in history, but you can't predict the future with history. We don't know what's yet to come. So we can back up and say it fits the past, just like we can go forward and say it fits the future. We still don't have any hardcore stuff
Yeah.
to go by either way.
Well, I've always heard that these 10 kingdoms got to come up again.
Roman Empire's got to come back alive.
Well, the thing is, you've seen the separation into these 10 countries, and it says 3 are uprooted. If you look at the futuristic view, then something's going to have to uproot 3 countries in the future, or in a historic view, which we see here has already happened. And like I said, there is no evidence left of them 3 countries' heritage anywhere. So it's just another view.
Yep. I agree. There's probably 15 other views out there that we're not even aware of too.
So let's finish up 7 then.
Let's finish up 7.
How much time's on the clock, Professor?
We have gone about 30 minutes. I think that's about right.
Probably
Hold
pretty-
up here and come back and do this on the second and finish it up.
I am, aren't I?
Yes, you are.
So did they
We've been
encourage
at
you to
30
bring
minutes.
your
See,
own
I've
cup?
done the historical view on 21 already by reading. I didn't read 21, but I brought it out.
You wanna come back in the next session and finish chapters, I heard Daniel said. Or you wanna do it now?
What do you think, David?
Well, you only got 30 minutes going by. What time is it? Is it 7 o'clock?
Uh,
10 till.
Or you might, since we got a late start, it's up to you.
Let's stop right here and come back and finish it in the next 30. Can we do that?
Yeah, we can. Yep, cut it off. That's a good idea.
All right,
We won't.
we'll be back.
We might not get to 8 after